Welcome to Mindfulness Alchemy for the Modern Soul. I'm Esther Vidic, and I would like to put a disclaimer before this recording. Please know that the intention of this discussion is to highlight the issues of toxic behavior of individuals and groups, and the business that is built around these themes as a driving force of the attention economy. Our aim is, as always, to help listeners find common ground and perhaps a more open-minded and open-hearted approach to sensitive topics that we face as a collective in today's society. This recording is in no way, shape, or form minimizing the real issues of domestic violence or any kind of abuse or the suffering and real struggles of victim survivors. With all that said, please enjoy this recording. Thank you. Welcome to Mindfulness Alchemy for the Modern Soul. As always, I'm your host, Esther Vidic, and today I'm joined by Josh Reid Jones again. Thank you, Josh, for being my partner for this recording.
Of course, my pleasure.
And today, our topic is bro culture, toxic masculinity, feminist extremism, and dangerous stereotypes. So we are going to open a can of worms and we are going to dissect it. And let's start with a little story. So I was online and I was listening to this lovely lady talking about bro culture and her take on it and her experience. And she said something like, if you're starting to date a man, ask him about his favorite books. And if How to Win Friends and Influence People, The 48 Laws of Power, and The Art of Seduction are his favorite books, those are all red flags and you should run. Now, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's a Dale Carnegie book, I believe, and I think it's a really brilliant book. And many people who work in sales or work with people actually greatly benefit from it. That's not at all toxic. But for fun, I picked up the other two books. I only skimmed over the 48 Laws of Power. I think there's great observations in there, but maybe in the wrong hands, it can be dangerous. However, The Art of Seduction is a very interesting book, and I think we should definitely not throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I think it's a problematic book. And let me just share something with you quickly. So the book begins by the author, Robert Greene, saying, seducers are completely amoral in their approach to life. It is all a game and an arena for play. Knowing that the moralist, the crabbed, repressed types who croak about the evils of the seducer secretly envy their power. They do not concern themselves with other people's opinions. They do not deal in moral judgments. Now, to begin with, that's problematic. He places the seducer above moral judgment, and he mocks people with ethical principles and values. But then he bravely continues and says, seduction is a form of deception, but people want to be led astray. They yearn to be seduced. If they didn't, seducers wouldn't find so many willing victims. And one of the main issues I have is that he keeps continuously referring to other people as victims. And he's referring to this art of seduction as like the hunt and find the correct victim for yourself. And he gives a lot of instructions on just how to do that. So that's quite problematic. But with all that said, let's dive in and let's talk about bro culture and toxic masculinity. And here I just want to give a very brief definition of what bro culture is, if someone is not familiar with that. So we understand that bro culture is an exclusionary social environment. And it's very much about hyper-masculinity and about intense competition between males. It is aimed to normalize potentially dangerous, aggressive, and even disrespectful behavior towards women. It tries to make sexist and derogatory jokes funny. It hinders equality, openness, and diversity. And it creates a toxic environment that excludes and marginalizes women as well as men who share different views and sentiments. Now, Josh, my friend, you are a very intelligent man and an educated one. And I would love to hear your opinion and your take and your observation when it comes to bro culture and toxic masculinity. And how do you see this situation?
Well, I think that it's an interesting situation in the sense that, like, with any toxicity, I always think like the toxicity, like, it's in the dose. You know, the damage is in the dose. It's not that any individual particular thing is necessarily always terrible. You know, like I guess the classic example is you can drink too much water, you know, and then you get hyponatremic and then you can be very sick. But you wouldn't say water is bad, but there's also, like, if water is too pure, it's also not good for you. You know, it leaches all the vitamins and minerals out of your system and all those sorts of things. And so, you know, the challenge, and I think that where the conversation tends to fall apart is that someone says toxic masculinity, and then someone says, oh, you think, you know, being a man is toxic and you want to get rid of all the differences between men and women. And, you know, neither of those things are necessarily true, that like all masculinity is toxic, or that, you know, to tackle the negative aspects of sort of, you know, exclusionary, hyper-competitive, victim-seeking sort of behaviours means that you don't like anything that's, you know, traditionally masculine or manly. So I always think, like, one of the huge challenges with this conversation is that we lump a lot of good and bad things into the conversation all at once, depending on what people's experience is and what their particular sort of element of it is that they don't like. So if someone might say, oh, they don't like combat sports, and so they say that's like leading to it. Some people don't like certain influences, so they'll say that's what's going on. Some people say they don't like, you know, wearing blue clothes as a kid, because that's, you know, setting people up for these gender roles that, you know, maybe lead down the track to some negative outcomes for people. And so it's always just couched in the individual bits, or often the individual people. And I think we saw that in that documentary, where it's like a huge focus on individual people and how bad these people are, instead of just being able to have a conversation about at what dose are these things and in what context are these things good, bad, or otherwise. You know, because there's, when you read through these things, like you said, you know, we read some of these books or something, sometimes you read them and you think, or you read bits of them and you think bits of this is quite good, and then other bits of it you think bits of this are awful. Or like, okay, well, if you take that and then you take this finding here and then use it to do this thing over here, you know, that's terrible. So, okay, so should we throw the whole thing in the bin, or should we be able to talk about when a particular action or a particular thing turns into something bad? And I think that's the conversation that people need to have, and we need to talk about how people are placed in their context, in community and around people, and in their relationships, and in their relationships to the people close to them and the people far away. And what are the sort of mitigating factors that lead to the exploitation of certain things that aren't necessarily intrinsically bad, but are exploited to be to have like a really negative impact on people, not just the people who are doing it or experiencing it, but also the people around them, and, you know, the victims, willing or otherwise. So I'm always think, like, when a conversation like this comes up, it gets really difficult to just say all of this is bad or all of this is good, because there's always an example of, you know, someone doing a good job of something and someone doing a bad job of something, but all of it is worth talking about and interrogating and going, okay, well, what part of this is good and at what point is this awful? For instance, with seduction, you know, I think it's normal for people to go out and try and attract one another, and, you know, it's a really seminal part of human existence. It's a can be a really fun and enjoyable and growth inducing and connection building part of being a teenager and being an adult, until someone's out there looking for victims, in which case that's awful. And no, you shouldn't set this premise of seduction or connection up at the beginning from this asymmetrical relationship where you're out there hunting a victim. Does that mean going out and trying to pick up girls or boys is terrible? No. But what it does mean is that taken to this sort of extreme or this sort of thing, yeah, that's awful. And so we should, let's work out where the good balance is. Let's talk about that. Let's get better tools to discuss it with people so that we don't leave people in harm's way.
Absolutely. And as you said, I think the important things is the nuance and also the context, and really evaluating, is it good behavior or is it bad behavior? Because, as you said, wanting to find a mate, wanting to find, a partner or whatever, or just being flirty, being young. I mean, we all been there, you know what I mean? Like, that's also part of our individual journey, is that you want to meet people, and through those relationships, many of them be like short-lived when we are young, depends on the person, depends on the culture, the environment, whatever. We know that there are things that are good and okay, and there are things that are part of a learning experience in our lives, and there are things that are absolutely not okay. Like, we have to respect boundaries. I think that the very toxic side of this, let's say, bro culture, is that when, especially when it comes to sex, when it comes to, a rape culture, which unfortunately we know exists, but that, once again, we have to remember that that is bad behavior. That's what should be called out and addressed. Not that is like the male of our species doing it. And unfortunately, I play devil's advocate, but I'm pretty sure there are, unfortunately, women out there who do predatory acts as well, even though it's different. But anyway, so back to the nuance. And let's talk about the impact of this, basically a toxic behavior that we want to, or a group of people try to make okay and try to make acceptable, that's how men should behave. The impact of that, in your opinion, on our society, and also on the young generation, the generation that's coming after us, what's the impact? What is that going to set them up for if this continues and becomes normalized?
So in the bro culture, conversation, the thing that I think it does is acts as a useful distraction a lot of the time. These influencers that have sort of risen to prominence as representatives of bro culture, they are selling a product. That's what they're doing. They're not everyone's friend. They're not like the person that someone's talking to, like, at work or whatever. They are cultivating a brand, and they are targeting that brand and their sort of money-making activities towards groups of people that are sensitive to, vulnerable to, or interested in parts of what they have to say. And they are, as a result, they are following essentially an algorithm, whether it's attention or sales, into a direction that keeps them in the zeitgeist and gives them the best chance to, make money, have some form of online influence, get attention or notoriety. So before we can talk about the bro culture, I think we're going to talk about the systems that are in place that incentivize that kind of drift. And part of that is the fact that on the internet, and which is where a lot of this stuff sort of takes place, in particular, on the internet, extreme positions, absolute confidence, one-way discussion, sort of just straight out, advice, listicles, these sorts of things, they play really well on the internet, and gotchas, and someone says something and I go, well, here's a point that refutes that, or an example of something that runs contrary to that. And so I'm going to use this, I'm going to take this big issue, And, like almost similar to what you said before, it's like, okay, so we have this issue with men behaving a certain way, and the overwhelming number of perpetrators of, say, violence in the home are men. And then someone on the internet who's got 30 seconds or a minute or whatever goes, well, this woman just shot her husband in the face. So where's all the outcry about that? And there's this whataboutism that feeds into an audience that's looking for something that they can say back and not have the conversation afterwards. Yeah. So the mitigating factors, I think, are that the internet pushes people to extreme positions anyway and incentivizes it because you get great engagement, that it incentivizes gotchas and not taking the time to talk through things, that the only metric for being listened to is attention. It's got nothing to do with whether or not you're actually somebody that perhaps should be listened to about a certain thing. And then the overarching elephant in the room that I think is left off this discussion all the time and shouldn't be, is that we talk about bro culture and a lot of the focus is on these young guys who are trying to make money and these middle-aged guys who are trying to make money off people by, talking about these things that, the expensive cars and the money and stuff. But the president of the United States is a lying, cheating, stealing, bankrupt, morally bankrupt, misogynist bully. And like, if you're trying to encourage people to behave a certain way, and we want to say, hey guys, if you want to get ahead in life and you want people to respect you and do the, you've got to act as, you've got to have this kind of character. At the end of the day, every single day, there is this guy who's in charge of the largest economy, the biggest army, quote unquote leader of the free world, who is the absolute worst of all of these things. And I don't think all the Andrew Tates in the world have the impact on people's perceptions of what actually gets you ahead more than things like that being the case, where some of the richest, the most powerful, the wealthiest, the most well-known people are objectively just disgusting humans. And I think it's a useful distraction to focus on TikTokers that have followings of, 500,000, 1 million people selling courses to, vulnerable young people or whatever. It's still a bad thing. They're bad actors, no question. But I mean, ultimately, some of the worst people on the planet are the most powerful people on the planet in positions of real power and influence, elected by people and supported by people. And so it makes the conversation about you shouldn't do these things very difficult when ultimately there's an example right there every day that says actually you can it's the only way to the top for people like you is to lean into it and become the worst iteration of the worst iteration. And actually, if you can be the worst of the worst, you get to the top. What kind of message is that for kids? So I think when we talk about bro culture and things like that, we've got all of these environmental sort of circumstances that are, of course, going to end up that way. They're going to push people in those directions. And it actually pushes people in other directions as well, in the same way that like extreme positions are valued on the internet. No sort of rear vision, no nuance, no discussions. You're encouraged to have an opinion and to feel that is the correct opinion that people need to come to. And that's true of like all kinds of things. And all of that does, when it comes to human relationships, and this is where it gets really dangerous, is you take all of that stuff and then you put it in the real world where people shut their computers or put their phones in their pockets and they go on a date or they go and talk to someone. And they've been told that, things like you're the A side in this. What you know is correct. If they don't meet you where you are, they're wrong. And then you don't need to worry about what's going on with that person. And actual relationships and actual friendships and actual connection is about going in and going, I think this and I'm very confident in this, or this is how I go through things. And someone says, I do it this way. And you go, that's interesting. Like maybe I'm not going to agree at the end of this and maybe I'm not going to change, but like I need to hold space for people to be different and going out in the world and finding different things and doing that sort of stuff. And so when you do that, you're not constantly just being forced to dig your heels in further on the couple of things that you think. So someone sits down and says, if you've got these three books, then I could never possibly date you. I mean, without the context of, like, you know, say behind me, where well, it's 3 of like 1,000. Is that still a red flag? You know, like, are there other books that can undo it? Like, what's the like, these hard and fast rules are so stupid because they stop you doing what humans do, which is to talk and interact and get context and understand people in more than just single individual units of sort of statement of fact. And so the bro culture is really good at just statements, like the negative people, but so are multi-level market salesmen, so are online beauty influencers. Like, that's the way people are taking in information and putting it out there. If you want to have a political position, you're going to get a lot more attention if you're like right on the extreme of something than if you're in the middle, because people don't want to listen or pay attention, or they start with their sort of, what about it? What about this? Or, you know, the gotchas and stuff. And so the environment that we're in at the moment is conducive to the worst expressions of all of these things, including these people getting a lot of attention for, you know, teaching people things that will put people in harm's way when those people put their phones down or shut their computers and go out into the real world.
I agree with you. First of all, what you said about Trump and other political leaders as well. And it really is, that is a societal issue, because they got elected, right? They can get away with everything. They never held accountable. So that you can say to your children or your teenage sons or whatever at home that, like, oh, you have to have morals, you have to be nice and kind and whatever. And they go like, well, in the real world, when I observe it, what I see is that if you're cutthroat, if you, you know, like, you gather resources and you're louder than the other people, then you win. And remember in our previous recording that we did, when we talked about dangerous ideologies and human dignity and whatever. And there you said it as well, that it's the loudest people. People will listen to the loudest people. And also an important thing is that, as you said, the exploitative nature of that, we could call it bro business rather than bro culture, because it's trying to cultivate the culture, you know, but it is business. And they are taking advantage of the vulnerable people who seek power and they want to feel better about themselves. Unfortunately, going about it the wrong way, because I think that you're...
Well, I would argue they're not even just looking for power. Like, a lot of these people, the vulnerable people, are just looking for some agency in their lives. And so it's not always, I don't think it starts with power. I think it starts with people who don't feel like they have control, or that what they do matters, or that they can influence their own lives in any way whatsoever, which is why so much of the bro culture messaging starts off with just conversations about agency. Clean your room, go to the gym, get in shape, work hard. These are not inherently terrible messages.
No,
but it's the start of getting agency. But then what do you do with that? It's if it then becomes to dominate, to boss around, to say you're better than, to walk around like you're better than, et cetera, then yeah, it's a massive issue. And then they start to treat people terribly as a result.
And that's also the nuance, because in a way, if you think about it, right, in our chosen fields, if we wish to succeed, whatever we do, we kind of have to be better than the average, better than the whatever. We have to work hard. So once again, it's nuance. What makes me better than, and what is the definition of the thing that I need to be better myself at? And it's not the expense of the other people, but to, you know, for a greater good. But yeah, that's totally true. And I think that can be dangerous if young people, for example, young men, don't have anyone to turn to or anywhere to bring it back down to earth and to balance it out, that could be a very dangerous influence on them. But, you know, it's not just the men. So, because we live in a world of duality, right? So now let's go and have a look at what women do, what ladies do. And and what is the whole hijacked concept of this feminist extremism, and which I also find very concerning. I think that the toxic side of bro culture or bro business is this feminist extremism, where men are depicted as these useless narcissists who are here to destroy and disempower women, and the patriarchy is to destroy us, and we have to fight men all the time, and in my experience, I met women who truly, genuinely believe this, and I personally think it's hell. So let's take a look at this one, and just one more quick thing here when it comes to feminism and acts of feminism. What I've noticed, let's say maybe the last year, the first time I came across it was on a very popular mainstream podcast that centers women. I won't name the podcast. And one of the hosts of the podcast talks about acts of microfeminism and encourages the listeners to do more of and email in or message in what they do. And when I first heard this, I nearly dropped the dishes in my hand, because I went like, this is ridiculous. So basically, microfeminism that's supposed to empower the women, right? For example, in a company email, put men's names last in a list. Or if a man opens the door, you shouldn't walk through. You should let them through first. You should definitely not smile at men at all, at any cost. And I just feel that is extremely toxic. I couldn't do this. It would make me feel very uncomfortable as a woman. But anyway, what I'm interested about is that have you encountered any of this? And how do you view this side of the story?
I mean, the fact that that was on a podcast really just makes the point I was making earlier, that extreme points of view and listicles and telling people these things is what gets attention. And the more extreme you go, the more click-worthy it is, for every reason, for people who agree and for people who want to rage at this being an example of what feminism is supposed to be, So for every person that says men are out there, you need to go out and hunt women, that same group of people, and they say that's toxic, they pull up a clip of that and they say this woman saying, that women shouldn't smile at men. And we're setting up everywhere for this like adversarial sort of conversation that is, wildly disconnected from the realities of having to live in the world with humans face to face. Works online because whatever, you're online and you're not in person. I think that there are absolutely genuine and reasonable and valid concerns from people about the gender inequalities that people face, not just here, but particularly, all over the world. And it's clear that there are a number of people, again, in power who are men, who are awful, and you can point to them and say there's some examples of awful men that are in charge. And, like as a man and as men, we have to cop that and go, yeah, that's true. They're men and they're awful. And that's true. It also doesn't mean all men are awful, in the same way that it doesn't mean that all women are awful. Like there's none of that exists. These are conversations people want to have to help make sense of a very complicated world with limited attention spans and limited brain space. So I think that we have these extreme notions of things. Sometimes they're useful in a conversation, as in it's useful to explore like what the extreme ends of these things look like. I studied feminist philosophy at university as part of my studies because I was interested in that point of view. I don't have a lived experience as a woman, obviously, and but it's half the people. It's probably even more than half the people that I love in my life, and there is an experience that women have that men don't have in a whole bunch of different ways, from physically to just how you walk through the world and all that kind of stuff. And I think acknowledging that is not putting things in a hierarchy at all times. And there are contexts that absolutely matter. I have sat in rooms where extremely privileged women have talked about the challenges that they've faced. And then I've walked out of those rooms to go and work with people, men in rooms where they're incredibly disadvantaged. And there is no doubt in my mind that those men are worse off than the women that I'd just spoken to or had just been in a room listening to speak to. And the idea that the people in the first room had any idea what life was like for this guys in the second room, you know, they don't, and it's crazy. But disadvantage and difficulty are contextual, just like who's up and who's down, who's scared and who's not, who's got the power dynamic in any given room and who doesn't. They're contextual. They change constantly, and they change in relation to people, and they change in relation to where you are physically, and sort of, you know, what economic situation you're in, and you know, what the environment is that you're in. And you learn that by being in the world with lots of different people and treating them like people, assuming good intent, and trying to learn more about people and be curious and connect. None of these movements at the extreme end are about actually connecting. They're about being correct and nailing down your position so you can walk into a room and be able to dismiss their experiences so that you can then impose your ideas about experience onto them. And that's dangerous, because as soon as you stop considering anyone else's circumstance and you can't have that conversation, you're not very good at being a human being. And you are just out there looking for either yeses or nos, someone to fight next to you or someone to fight with. And no one's happy in that environment, and nothing good can come of that. And it sells tickets to stuff, and it sells books, and it gets clicks, and it does all of those things, but it doesn't make happier people. It doesn't make more connected communities, and no one's better off for it. So in every version of that, it's always, I think, like where people say you should never open the door, like you never smile at a man that opens the door for you. We can have this like contextual discussion that goes on ad infinitum about different intersectionalities. So what if it's an Aboriginal man and he's holding the door open for a white woman and she goes, no, absolutely not. And he interprets it as being like, oh, she doesn't want me to walk behind her because I'm Aboriginal or something. She's scared of me. And he has this negative microaggression or aggression experience. And she thinks I'm being a great, because we've just got these arbitrary rules that pay no attention to the people involved in them. And then what? What good can come of that? What good comes of that? When you're little, there are some useful rules when you're a little kid. Don't get into a car with strangers, don't do these sorts of, but don't talk to strangers is not a great rule for little kids. Because it's like, talk to strangers if I'm here. Talk to strangers if they're with their friends. Talk to strangers if that stranger looks like it's the parent of your friend. You can talk to strangers. Don't walk off down the street and around the corner with a stranger. Don't run off and talk to a stranger when no one's around. The context matters, but it's so much easier to just make up a rule and then have a kid that grows up never speaking to anybody else that they don't already know, which begs the question, how do you ever meet someone if you don't talk to strangers? Like, of course you're talking to strangers. That's how you meet people. Everyone's a stranger until you meet them. But we don't ever go through the process of talking them through what this looks like, and what matters, and how to take in another person's experience so that you can be better yourself as well. And so every version of like, here are 5 rules you've got to do every time, I think contributes to the polarization of people and the digging in of their heels on these things that creates things like a really negative bro culture experience or a really negative feminism experience. My personal belief is that, yes, feminism is important, that there should be equal, we should have equality on like basically every level that it's possible to sort of create societal support to level people up. For women, for people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds, from people with disabilities, I think all of these things we should be working constantly to bring the floor up for people so that everyone's got the maximum opportunity to be the kind of person they want to be. I think with men, it's important to have good friends. It's important to do things. It's important to have agency. It's not important to go out hunting for people to seduce by tricking them, or to just have heaps of money so that you can then, be more powerful than other people in order to exploit them to your own ends. I think that's a disgusting way to live life. But men need friends. Men need activities. I don't see a problem with 90% of that kind of stuff. So how do we give people the opportunity to just work through the nuances in the context all the time? And none of that works from like a guru just telling everybody what to do on the internet. Like none of it works if you just make super hard and fast rules about inane things like how to approach someone opening a door for you. There can be hard and fast rules in the world. I've got no problem with some of them. Don't murder children. I think that's good. There's basically just don't do it. Don't do it. But don't smile when someone opens the door for you. I mean, we're getting a bit ridiculous. Or, don't go out on a date with a woman who's had four boyfriends before you. What are you talking about? It's insane. It's so stupid. It's so reductive. It's so pointless, and embarrassing. But if we can't keep people in the room to have the conversation, then we can't ever move past those dumb rules. And everyone's got enough examples of the other side of the sort of argument doing something so ridiculous and so stupid that when you say you shouldn't do this, they go, well, you did that. Or you shouldn't say this. They go, well, you said that. And again, we don't get anywhere because everyone's just trying to catch everyone out. I think that's so dangerous, but that's where we are at the moment with this conversation so often.
It's so true. And you made so many good points, is that, first of all, some generalizations are very helpful, and it's part of our, let's say, our evolutionary biology. We learned certain things, certain behaviors are dangerous, we should avoid them, regardless of our sex or gender. Then we always had groups, like groups of men, groups of women. We talk about each other. We used to learn from our moms and our nans and our aunties of how we should be as girls and how men are. And that used to be something, that used to be wisdom in there. That used to be something that is nurtured. So the next generation of women, let's say, kind of know how to, it's going to sound very retro, okay? But how to be a good wife, how to be a good mom, how to run your household, God forbid, how to keep your husband happy in that relationship, because somewhat you are responsible for your part of the relationship, right? So those things should be important, yes, but it has to be assessed on an individual basis. Right? As like you said, it's not about the books you read, or it's, not about he said that one thing, oh, that's a red flag, let's run away. These are all catchphrases. And I consume a lot of psychology content. So, and read a lot of books about it. Obviously, that's, my Roman Empire, whatever. And yes, narcissistic personality disorder is a real thing, but doesn't mean that every man who, he acted weird, all of a sudden he is a narcissist and red flags and run away. Obviously, if there are things there where you feel that that person is not meeting you and you're not vibing because you may not have the same, the things that really matter, that you morally kind of on the same page and whatever, then, walk away, do not continue the thing, and definitely keep yourself safe. And you should say no. And if someone doesn't respect your boundaries, that's once again a behavioral issue for that particular person. And if that particular person is danger to you, that's a massive issue. But just because he happened to be a man, I mean, my goodness, why are you on a date with a man if you hate men so much to begin with? I don't know. So that's it became really, really, and we see the same dynamics in politics as well. It really seems to me that we live in a time and a world where the extremes are really pulling and pushing against each other. And And here we go now. And I usually like to end all of the recordings that I do with my guests. And you know that by now, when we get towards the end, I would like to, well, present a solution, even that we probably can't present a solution, but how can we, as a society and as individuals, in your opinion, how can we make changes, and what kind of changes should we make, first of all, in our minds and in our hearts, to be able to be more open? Because what's going on at the moment, in my opinion, is toxic. It's awful. It's ruining men. It's ruining women. It's ruining our chances to be able to meet organically, to look at the other person for who he or she is, and for straight people, right? Heterosexual men and women, especially if someone would like to have a family and would love to have children. I mean, that's how children are made. It becomes harder and harder, and there's a massive gap, and we are basically all dying because we know there is femicide, but we also know that there is the male loneliness epidemic, and that's a real thing. So I give it over to you, Josh. Bring your wisdom, bring your views, and please do share.
Like close to home, I think it's about not taking an adversarial approach to the whole world all the time. You know, connection is about holding space for other people's experiences, which means, you know, inconvenience, disagreement, difficulty. You know, it's not all great, and you can't imagine your ideal person in their entirety. You can't imagine, you know, what your best friend is going to look like in their entirety, because you can't have a great relationship or a best friend or anything like that if you've already decided everything that they're going to be. Like, part of the magic is in the differences between people and holding that space. And so learning how to be good friends on a one-to-one basis is really important. Then learning how to be a good friend to other people who you're not friends with yet is important. And then learning how to be a good friend to other people where the relationship dynamics are not the same. You're not meeting on a one-to-one sort of equal basis. And that's being a good uncle, being a good auntie, being a good coworker, being a good neighbor, being a good, you know, young, able-bodied neighbor to my elderly, not so able-bodied neighbor who, you know, we can't do everything the same. And so she's never opened the door for me, and I've opened the door for her. So is that, like, are we getting out of whack? Is there an imbalance there? Or is it just the right thing to do because she's got a fucking walker, and, like, what am I going to do? Wait for her and be like, I've opened it the last 10 times. It's your turn, Sandra. Go and open the door for me. Like, that's ridiculous. And as soon as you've got rules about that kind of stuff, you can find exceptions everywhere. So as an individual going through the world, having that ability to work past the idea that you're going to be able to speak these things into existence, say, I want all of these features in a friend or a partner or this or that. And if the world doesn't deliver it to me, then I know it's the wrong person. I think we need to move past that, because you're a part of something that's much bigger. And then I think the second thing is to look around people. So on a one-to-one basis, you go in and you're prepared to have these conversations. You're trying always to be a better friend and learn more. Like, a good friend is always learning from people, and, you know, you're expanding your worldview, and you're leaving with more love and connection as opposed to less, you know, and that's great. Doesn't mean you don't have conflict. Doesn't mean you don't disagree, but you're expanding your experience of the world. But then to look around people and go, okay, well, what are the conditions that make being a good and happy and friendly person? What are the conditions that help people to have, you know, good, happy families, to have kids, do those sorts of things, to not be lonely, to not be isolated, to not be so stressed, to not feel that if they aren't the boss with all the power, that means that they're a zero and they're going to be trodden on because that's what they're seeing everywhere, or that's their sort of economic and social situation because they're migrants, or they're growing up in a town with not much money, or they come from a family like that's struggling, and so they see that their only way out and the only thing that matters are these things. To be able to look around people and then want to improve the situations around others to create the conditions that support happy, healthy, connected, engaged, responsible communities with integrity. And the financial system and the real estate sort of industry in New York created a Donald Trump, because of course it did. He inherited billions of dollars. He lost most of it. He's been bankrupt a bunch of times. He's a moron. If he's read 3 books in his life, I'd be shocked, because his only skill is self-preservation, and the system rewards that. You look around people, all those people in those buildings that he was kicking out that had an unequal sort of power relationship to him and financial relationship to him, and he could just trot on them because no one was standing up for them all the way back in the 80s. And because of that, we now have Donald Trump. And so there is a direct line between the way you pay attention to the world and who we let get trodden on, how we leave people in harm's way, how we leave people with not enough safety and space and agency and support. And that actually makes things difficult for everybody else. We leave everybody else in harm's way as a result. So when you look at the people around you, instead of going, these are the only people I'm going to care about, you hone your skills, your friendship skills, your understanding skills, your critical thinking, your ability to sit in discomfort and learn and understand other people's context. You take those skills and then you expand your care beyond that and go, well, how do we provide the best of my experience to as many people as possible? How do we remove the worst of my experience from the lives of as many other people? How do we remove the worst experiences in the world from the lives of other people so they can be happy and they can be connected and they can lean into the better parts of human nature? And we're not teaching them that stamping on people and trying to be powerful so you can take advantage of them is actually the answer. And then vote accordingly, have your conversations accordingly, learn accordingly. Then I think we can, mitigate some of the worst of these challenges and teach people the right things along the way. But it's not about tackling the people who are at the moment really well remunerated, well rewarded with attention by doing these things, because unless we tackle the systems that reward that attention getting behavior, the individuals who are doing it are inconsequential. There's always going to be another one. There's always going to be someone who's willing to say something more extreme, do something more crazy to capitalize on the algorithm. We're not going to change the algorithm anytime soon by being online. If we're going to change it, it's by making the algorithm redundant, by being offline and being in the real world with people and finishing complete thoughts, learning complete things, reading complete books, having complete conversations, having relationships that are deep and meaningful, and looking for ways to give agency to people around us that brings them together, doesn't separate them out into different categories and sort of put one on top of another. And I think that's the sort of stuff that we need to be paying attention to. And, along the way, it's fine to criticize individuals who are doing shitty things, but, they're operating in a system that rewards it. And the way to tackle that system is probably to be offline and in the real world as much as possible. And then from there, tackle the system that's creating the incentivized structures that have led to some pretty awful things over the last, 10 or 15 years.
Very well said, especially the bit when you said that, look, in an attention economy, right? If we don't want this behavior to prevail, then we need to take the attention away from it. Just like, let's say, a similar thing. If I know that a certain company, right, even though I'm just one consumer, if I know a certain company engages in warfare or whatever, and they, bombing a certain place or a certain country with certain people in it, and I do not wish to support the war machine, then I stop purchasing from that company. If I don't want to hear very delusional man who would need to go to therapy instead of being online and preaching about these things to other people who are vulnerable, I am going to tune out. And once again, it's the individual, it is the behavior, and we need to address those things. And this is not the first time we agree on that we do need to start paying more attention to our immediate, real life human connections, our friends, our family, our neighbors, our immediate community, the people we meet. And we really need to be able to connect, because so many people would be surprised that the more we do that, the more we realize that we have so many things in common. And generally, we all want the same thing. We want a peaceful existence. We all want to be respected. We try to be respectful towards the other people and so on. So all this, much of the problem at the moment, I think, is online, as you said, and it's a business and the clicks and the whatever. Now, obviously, the issue is there. There's an underlying issue, but this is just making it like, or puffing it up. You know, like, I don't know, what animal, you know, like the animal in the wild that gets scared and it looks much bigger than what it is, actually.
Yeah.
And I think this is what it is.
Yep.
And once again, that if there was a force in the world that benefited from us being divided, you know, divide and conquer, then we must realize that these are perfect tools to destroy the family unit, to destroy a natural, harmonious existence of men and women together, and communities and so on. So maybe bring
100%.
our awareness to that as well, that this is a tool and we are being played, basically, and we are buying into it and giving the attention to it. But to wrap up our recording today, I've created something really, really fun. And if anyone gets easily offended, please tune out now. This is just for some fun, okay? Now, I came across a lady very passionately talking about this. She created a chart similar to this about men. And I'm not sure if it was rage bait, but she genuinely looked like she believes what she's talking about. And her point was that she cannot find herself a suitable male partner because, and so here comes the chart. I will pop it up on the screen. Dangerous generalized stereotypes for men and women. That's what I called it. So let's start with men, okay? If a man is smart and nice, then he must be a nerd. If he is nice and handsome, then he must be dumb. If he is handsome and smart, then he has to be a jerk. But if he is smart, nice, and handsome, he's definitely gay. And the version for us women goes like this. If she's smart and nice, she must be ugly. If she's smart and pretty, she's definitely weird. And if she's pretty and nice, she's boring. But if she's smart, nice, and pretty, she is a complete slut. Now, these charts, just, I made these up to really represent our discussion in a fun way, that these are stereotypes and they are dangerous. And if we really go by this, and this is how we're going to start perceiving everybody, and we accept this as absolute truth, then we're going to miss out on the human connection we can have with each other.
Absolutely, yeah. And just for the record, my girlfriend is she's beautiful and she's smart and she's funny and she's lovely and she's a lot of fun and she's great. So I don't know what that does. So I mean, there's always one example of something, you know, counter to what someone else says. But I feel like I know a lot of people that beat the stereotype. Maybe I'm just lucky. Maybe I just spend more time with actual people.
I feel the same way. And, you know, the thing is like, is someone ugly, you know, or pretty? Once again, it's like a matter of how we perceive that person. But one thing is for sure. I never met a person who cultivated kindness, who was interested about people, regardless of the level of education they had, who really had a genuinely good heart and actually give a shit about others, who was ever ugly. I never met a person like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You know, this is what it
true.
is. And I hope that whoever's listening can take away something from another lovely discussion. And I thank you again, Josh, for coming on, jumping on, being my partner, helping me open this can of worms and dissect them. And I hope that we offered some, you know, good points. And I think you made many great points that how we could close this gap and really start acting like the wonderful human beings that we can be and that we can become. and maybe we should really stop letting people play us and like rouse against each other, and try to address the issue,
100%.
call out the behavior, and if we can, just let's keep an open mind and an open heart.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much for having me. It's always a great pleasure to have a chance to have a chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, we're going to sign off now. I hope all of you guys who are listening having a good time, and I hope there's something in there that you can take away. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again, Josh.